Alrighty, we can go ahead and get started with some introductions. Um, Hello, everyone. It is nice to see you. Motivation Monday is welcome to our second Motivation Monday of the year. Um, this Motivation Monday is hosted by our graduate student committee for AERA's Motivation and Education Special Interest Group. We offer this program as a way to disseminate and share ideas on strategies for conducting educational research. This year, we are, of course, continuing our Motivation Monday from past years with new topics and panelists. And of course, our wonderful graduate student leaders have organized this series each month. So shout out to the Motivation Monday subcommittee. And we're happy to have you here today, and we'd love for you to join us for our future meetings as well. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that October includes many awareness days, including Mental Health Awareness Week, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Dyslexia Awareness Month, an LGBTQ Center Day. Indigenous Peoples Day took place on October 9th as well, and the GSE recognizes, appreciates, and applauds all of the individuals from many different walks of life who contribute and continue to contribute to educational research. Today, we have four wonderful scholars here with us to discuss balancing competing priorities and thriving amidst multiple projects and deadlines. So first and foremost, we'll be discussing balancing competing priorities. My name is Kimiko Ching. I am a fourth year at Ohio State, and I will be facilitating today's discussion. We have four panelists. We will start with Dr. Jessica Gladstone. She is
Oh,
she is an
sorry.
assistant. You're good. Hello. She's an assistant professor in the Developmental Science Division of the Department of Educational Psychology. She obtained her PhD at the University of Maryland in 2020 with specializations in educational psychology and development science. Her research aims to provide novel information about the development of achievement motivation and what can impact this development. In her research, she programmatically examined student STEM motivation and engagement through three lines of research. One, how do important socializers like parents, teachers, peers, and role models impact students' motivation and engagement in STEM? How do motivation and engagement relate over time to predict student STEM achievement? And three, a critical analysis of the construct grit and how it relates to student STEM motivation, self-regulation, engagement, and achievement. To help answer these questions, she uses various methods, including survey research, qualitative interviews, focus groups, longitudinal designs, field and lab-based experiments, and content analyses. Very lucky to have her here. We are also joined today by Dr. Christy Robinson. Dr. Christy Robinson is an assistant professor in the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University, where she directs the Motivation, Identity, Learning, and Education in STEM, the MILES lab. In her research, she examines how and why students' motivation changes over time, with the aim of understanding how educational settings can meet students' diverse motivational needs. And we are also joined by Dr. Taya Rutherford. Dr. Rutherford is an Associate Director of Graduate Studies and an Associate Professor in Learning Sciences and Educational Statistics and Research Methods in the School of Education and at the University of Delaware. She holds affiliate appointments in the Department of Computer and Information Sciences and the Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences. Dr. Rutherford received her PhD in Learning, Cognition, and Development from the University of California, Irvine, her JD from Boston University School of Law, and her bachelor's degree in elementary education with a concentration in computers in the classroom from Florida International University. Dr. Rutherford's research focuses on learning and motivation in online and technology contexts with a specific focus on mathematics, computer science, and computer science education. Dr. Rutherford has been awarded over $6.5 million in federal grants as a PI or co-PI and has published in outlets such as Contemporary Education, Learning and Instruction, and Computers in Education. One of her recent National Science Foundation funded projects examines students in the moment, motivation, and emotions as they work within a digital mathematics learning tool. You can visit her through Google Scholar, Twitter, Blue Sky, all of those things, and lab website. We have shared some links to recent publications from our scholars in the chat. And I'm checking to see if there's one more I need to introduce. We will go ahead and get started. So, for our discussion today, we'll have a few different sections. We'll start off with a discussion with our panelists with some prepared questions that we have. And then there'll be a chance for you all to ask your questions. So you can send those in the chat. We'll keep track of them and we will share them out at the end. So I'm
Miko,
going.
he actually just joined if you want to
Oh, well then,
check for 1 second.
before we start that, we are also joined by Dr. Eric Anderman. Um, Dr. Anderman is a professor of educational psychology and quantitative research evaluation and measurement in the College of Education and Human Ecology and the interim dean and director at Ohio State Mansfield. He received his PhD in educational psychology from the University of Michigan, and he holds degrees from Harvard and Tufts University. His research focuses on the relations between human motivation and adolescent risk behavior, academic integrity like cheating, and violence perpetrated against educators. He is a fellow of both the American Psychological Association and the American Educational Research Association. His research has been funded by the National Institute of Health, the Institute of Educational Sciences, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. He is the editor of the journal Theory into Practice, and he co-edited the Visible Learning Guide to Student Achievement with John Haiti and the 2016 Handbook of Educational Psychology with Lynn Cornell. He is the co-author of 3 textbooks and has published over 100 peer-reviewed articles and invited chapters. He is an appointed member of the American Psychological Association's Task Force on Violence Perpetrated Against Educators. He and other members of the task force recently participated in a briefing to the U.S. Congress advocating for legislation and policy to support the safety of the education workforce. His research has been featured on numerous media outlets, including CBS News, NBC News, Dateline NBC, CNN, NPR, The Huffington Post, The Wall Street Journal, and New York Magazine. We are very lucky to be joined by these 4 folks. We will go ahead and get started with our discussion. So if you have any questions as we work through, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will ask questions from the audience at the end. So to start us off today, we would like each of our panelists, and we can go in any order, just feel free to unmute yourself and share. Can you briefly describe your current position and the different types of responsibilities you hold or projects you balance? And I will share these in the chat.
I can start us off just to get it rolling. So I'm currently an assistant professor at McGill University. I'm just in my 5th year of being an assistant professor in the Department of Counseling and Educational Psychology here at McGill. So my job is a balance of teaching, research, and service, which I think if you're in doctoral programs, you've got a supervisor, chances are that's probably their job too. So I won't elaborate on that, but essentially I need to generate research findings, I need to apply for grants, I need to teach courses and supervise students, and I need to do service to my program, my department, my faculty, and my university, as well as to the broader scholarly community.
Thank you. Yes, balancing all of those elements for being a professor, all the things we're told in grad school.
I guess I can jump in next. As you heard in the introduction, I'm an associate professor of learning sciences, and like Christy, I have a research, teaching, and service balance. Right now, my research and service are a little higher than typical because I have an administrative role as the associate director of graduate studies, and I have a number of funded projects that buy me out of my teaching time. I went ahead and I'll put it in the chat. I was like, how can I introduce my projects? And so I made a little slide that shows you what, if you're curious, what the projects are. And did you want us to go on to the questions about what route and which are required to, Kamiko?
Sure, yeah, you can share what route led you to involvement in these areas and what is required for your position.
So I had an interest in administration, and doing a grad director role is kind of like a nice entry admin role. And so that led me to take that on. And then that's not required for my permission, but there is some kind of like obligation people feel to take on these, especially these more minor administrative roles. And then the balance of my position, the workload increase on research is also not required. It's highly encouraged, obviously, that we get grant funding. And the grant funding isn't so much to fund my research anymore, but as a faculty member, it's almost expected that you get grants to fund the university. So like us getting grants keeps the lights on at the university. And so that's where the pressure is for that.
Thank you, yeah. And
I-
this, go ahead, Eric.
I apologize for being late. My calendar invite had a Teams invite for some reason. I was the only one. I don't know why that happened. Anyway, glad to be here with everybody. So I'm currently in an administrative role, but I'm still in my faculty role. I'm serving as the interim dean for a 2-year period on one of Ohio State's regional campuses, which is a whole fascinating learning curve for me because I've never been on a regional campus before. But and so I'm doing that, but at the same time, I'm also still doing a lot of my faculty responsibilities. So I'm supervise all of the teaching assistants for our large undergraduate course. Several of the folks who teach it are on this call. And I still am, I have 2 active grants. I have a third one that just ended in June. So that's just, it's a lot of work with that. I'm also the editor of the journal Theory into Practice. Kimiko and Ari are my editorial assistants, and they can talk about what a wonderful job they do about reminding me about all the things that I don't do on time, but eventually do afterward. And I'm involved in external things too, like this task force, and that Kimiko mentioned, the APA task force. And we can talk about it after, but the only way to handle that is you surround yourself with really, really good people who can work collaboratively with you and put a lot of trust in them. And my rule, and Kimiko and Ari will both swear by this. I say, when I'm slow about something, send me emails, send me reminders, be as annoying as you can. I will not take it personally. It is helpful to me, because that's what's really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, the clear expectation to not worry about emailing again has always been lovely.
Yeah, I guess I can go next. So I'm an assistant professor. I started in January. So this is actually my first official year for tenure. Last semester, I like to consider it my soft launch into the assistant professor lifestyle, which is actually really nice. And we can talk about pros and cons of starting halfway through an academic year if people are interested in that. So similar to everyone else, research, teaching, and service. But since this is my first year, teaching and service are pretty light for me this year. I got some course releases, and assistant professors are typically, at least in my department, discouraged from doing too much service because it can take up a lot of time. There are obviously some service-related areas that are really beneficial for assistant professors, and especially if there's a way to make connections between all 3 of these buckets of research, teaching, and service. That's like the dream when that can happen, and sometimes that does happen. And in terms of like projects that I'm working on, I'm just going to talk about one project that's specific to the University of Illinois, because I have lots of other projects from my postdocs and grad school that are still continuing on. But this project, I think, is really cool because it's in collaboration with folks in the College of Engineering. And what led me to get involved in this was that the College of Engineering sent out this email for a mixer between the College of Education and the College of Engineering to get together and talk about potential research ideas. And as a new faculty member, I thought, wow, this is great. Like maybe I can meet some people to do some projects with, especially since my area of focus is STEM. And at the University of Illinois, the College of Engineering is incredible. It's a big draw for students to come to the University of Illinois to be in the College of Engineering. So that led me to go to this mixer. And from there, we came up with a research idea. We put in a proposal and we got some money, and we started data collection just a few weeks ago, and it's been really, really nice. So all about taking opportunities when they present themselves.
Thank you. I think we're really lucky to have folks joining us from different stages of their career. I think it helps put things into perspective for all of us still in grad school. It's nice to see kind of starting off, seeing how folks are balancing it later on. I also really like the visual from you, Dr. Rutherford, of just different elements and where they're kind of falling. I think it really helps me to picture it. Thank you for sharing all of that. We would like to ask you then next, what strategies or considerations do you think through when deciding whether to accept a project or a role? Think about like what boundaries you maybe set for yourself, what boundaries maybe we should set for ourselves.
And I really like what Jessica just said about checking multiple boxes with one commitment. I think that's such a great way to determine how to say yes to something. Like for us in my department, my job, they similarly protected me from a lot of the service in the first year or two or three. I was very lucky that I basically felt like I was hiding in my office, just working away at research. And my service responsibilities only started to ramp up maybe in my third or fourth year. The golden opportunity for service was the fellowships committee, because all of our doctoral students and our master's students too are required to apply for external funding. We have national and provincial fellowships that are really highly sought after here in Canada. It's like the NSF in the US, but more people get it, and it's kind of more expected that everyone will apply. So being on the committee of the faculty who reviews everyone's fellowship application in our department, to help decide who then gets forwarded on to the next stage of review, that has been the best opportunity, because it checks a service box, and it's a great group of people, and it's a serious commitment of time, but it also helps me develop I can see what my colleagues are doing, what kind of research they're involved in. I can see the wide range of applications, like what makes a really great application, and in lots of different ways. And then I can check a teaching box too, because then I can turn around and mentor my own students on what are those principles of developing a really great application. So that's like one great example for me of where I've been able to absolutely say yes wholeheartedly to this, because it's so beneficial to me and to my group, and to developing ties with other people, just because I can say, oh, I read your student's application, I can see this awesome work you're doing, and it's great to be able to know. There's a lot of faculty or a lot of situations where I just wouldn't know what they were doing unless I went and looked at their CV, right? And so that's one great way to get to know my colleagues' work, and do all these other things. So checking multiple boxes. I think another, if it's someone asking me to collaborate, or should I apply for a grant or something like that, I think I'm still trying to check multiple boxes. Part of the research commitment and maybe the teaching mentoring commitment too is trying to make sure my students have funding. That's not technically a part of my job that's required, but getting grants is required, and the norm is that 80+% of those grants go to students. So kind of that's an implicit expectation, and just for my own values, I really want my students to have funding throughout their programs. So that's a huge consideration. If the grant opportunity is going to allow me to put that much money toward my students, then I'm going to go for it. And if it's going to let us pursue projects that we want to pursue. When someone asks me to collaborate, I'm gonna weigh, yes, like, is this gonna add to my strategic sort of research program and trajectory? Like, is it going to help make a story about what I'm going to do? And is it going to give me joy? Right. So I really like working with people that I like. I think that's a way to maintain the joy in the job and make sure it's a really sustainable, lifelong career. Luckily, we have really great people in our field. So I don't think there's anyone I would say no to because I don't like them. But that's definitely a factor for me. Like, yes, does it check a box on pragmatics, right? Like, is it going to help me keep this job and keep doing work that I love, but also is it just going to give me joy day to day? Like, in the actual task that I'm going to do, is it going to be a chore or not? That's a huge consideration for me. So I'll pause there.
Oh, thank you. I think that's something that we sometimes forget to consider when we're taking on multiple projects, is considering, like, will this bring me joy? Will this be fulfilling? Thank you.
I think it depends on the stage of your career. There are different things at different points in my career there are things I say yes to now that I never would have said yes to long ago, particularly like administrative roles. And sometimes you do get asked to do administrative roles when you're still an assistant professor. The one thing I would say as a piece of advice is I agree that things where you can check off multiple boxes are great. When you get asked to do things at your institution, you might sometimes not know what to do. And I always think it's really good to have someone you can trust, who you trust, who you have a good relationship, whom you can just say, hey, I was asked to be on the so-and-so committee and I really don't want to do it, but is it okay for me to say no to that? Meaning there does a little bit of politicking, because you don't want people to resent you and think like, oh, well, you don't, you're so special, you don't have to do that. And there are sometimes people who feel that way. So it's just always good to have somebody you can trust that you can check with. I mean, in the role that I'm in now, I tell the junior faculty, like, if you get asked to do something, come talk to me and I'll tell you whether or not you should do it or not. And usually I try to find a way to protect them and get them out of it, unless it'll be something that'll be really helpful for them. But really, if you don't know what to do, having someone to check with someone, even if it's someone at your former institution, that's okay too.
That's great. It goes back to building those connections that Dr. Gladstone was talking about and finding those collaborations, because then you do have somebody who you can ask for advice, and that's awesome.
For me, I think I'm still learning what strategies or considerations I use to accept. I think I'm better at bracketing my role than saying no. So I'll say, like, this is what I have time to contribute. And if somebody wants a weekly meeting for something, no, I probably don't have time for that. But monthly, fortnightly, like, what is this going to take? I'm not like asked so many things that I really have to say no to a lot of stuff. And usually, like Christy, I like working with the people in our field or at my university. And so I'm happy to say yes. I'd like to say I'm kind of strategic in what fits for where my research is going as far as a vision. But I just really think, is the project fun or interesting, and do I like the people? And I'm okay like taking some detours away from my like current vision of my research, because these detours in the past have led to really meaningful enhancements in my work.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense, to giving clear expectations so folks know, if you could contribute, this is how you can, and not necessarily saying no to experiences that might open many doors.
Yeah, I definitely echo what everyone has been saying. I'm also definitely learning like when to say yes, when to say no, and that maybe is an option. And that's one that I don't use enough, and I should use, and throwing that piece of advice to others, because if you say maybe, you can always then come back and say yes or say no. It leaves that door open for either option. I also liked Taya's like research program that she put in the chat, because it kind of shows how things go together. And that's one thing that I've also started to use in terms of deciding like what to say yes to, is like, does this fit within my program of research? And if it doesn't, is there a way to connect it in, or will this bring me to other connections that I am really hoping to make in my career? So to say a yes, I need like boxes to be checked, basically. And part of that is because in grad school, I did say yes to a lot of opportunities, but many of those opportunities didn't lead to anything. And sometimes that was because of, you know, people deciding that academia wasn't for them anymore, and the papers just kind of sat there. Nothing happened with them. And that's a lot of time to put into a project for it not to go anywhere. And so I've been trying to be a little bit more strategic about what I say yes, no, or maybe to. And the other thing that I do is I just ask for advice a lot. You know, I'm mostly winging it, and I have, you know, a wonderful group of people around me that when I'm not sure if I should say yes to something, I ask, and sometimes I get conflicting advice. And that's always interesting to try and navigate. But I just have found it so helpful to talk to other people in different stages as well, to see like, is this an opportunity that you think I should take? Or should I say no now? And there's a possibility that it will come back to me later, which is always very possible, right? That opportunities don't always just happen in the moment. Sometimes they're offered later down the road. And then the other thing is, when you do say yes to something, like what Taya was saying, like being clear about what you can contribute in that moment, I think is really, really helpful. Because I've been in collaborations before where we haven't done that, and it's really unclear who's doing what and who should be spending how much time on X, Y, or Z. And that makes things really difficult to move forward. And so having like the discussion at the beginning of a project of like, well, you're an expert in expectancy value theory, so I'd love for you to tackle that part. I think that can be really helpful in terms of figuring out, can I actually take on this project right now based on what might be expected of me in that role?
Thank you. I think we're hearing a lot of like setting boundaries, asking advice. I just told my students today that asking for help is hard and they should do it. So probably something I should take on in my own advice, right? And setting boundaries is in multiple ways, setting boundaries with time and setting boundaries with clear expectations for yourself and others, which I've been told, but when do we take it to heart? Thank you for sharing. We have another question here for you all. When is a good time to decide if you should consider reprioritizing or dropping commitments, especially if you find that you are overcommitted to working? How do you learn to say no at the beginning versus realizing that you're overcommitted?
I'll start. I mean, I think that it's very hard to say no, especially when you're newer at this. And I always said yes to too many things, and you don't want to. I'll use the possible selves construct. You don't want your possible self to be someone who makes a lot of commitments and then is seen as somebody who doesn't follow through on them. And that's, I think, the question you have to ask yourself is, can I deliver the goods? What is going to be expected of me? Can I reasonably do this? It's better in the long run, and trust me on this, to say no if you know you can't follow through, than to say yes and then to let people down. So you really, it's self-regulation. You have to really think about that and be very, very planful. I have a colleague who, when she went up, she made a 5-year plan going up for tenure, which is very hard to do because life happens and things change, but that helped her to make decisions along the way of sort of what she knew she needed to have done within a 5-6 year period, and helping to make decisions along the way. But, you know, above all, it's really, do I want to, it's kind of expectancy value. Do I want to do this? Will it be fun to do it? But also, can I follow through and do it? The worst thing is to not follow through on that, whatever commitment you make.
Thanks. Yeah, and hearing like it, whoa, my voice just disappeared. Hearing like it's better to say no at the beginning. Do you have advice on saying no without necessarily closing the door on future opportunities with that same collaborator?
You just, yeah, say now's not a good time. Particularly if you're pre-tenure, you can say, I'd love to, you know, work more with you once I get through tenure, and then to reach out to them again. That's, you know, that's perfectly fine to do. And there's lots of, you know, things that, you know, the opportunities that there'll be new opportunities. So just being honest about it.
Thank you.
I'd love to follow up to what Eric is saying and note that saying no at the right time at the beginning is really hard, and is, you don't always have complete information on the project. It might be something that you weren't expecting, you know, especially the last few years, life has hit a lot of people hard, and, you know, different emergencies or things that shouldn't have been emergencies but have escalated to them happen. And so then there's a way to back out or reduce your role gracefully. And the thing to do is to communicate honestly and quickly with your collaborators, because it's going to happen that you're going to say yes to something that you have to reduce your role in, or that you have to back out of. That's just an eventuality. And don't ghost people, you know, just be honest about it.
I will follow up on that, just because I'm in a situation right now where I have said yes to something and it's ended up being a lot more work, a lot more meetings. It's not what I expected it to be. And now I'm trying to decide, is this something that I should continue doing, or should I back away from this, because it's taking away from other projects that I now feel like a bad collaborator on, because I don't have time for that project because of this other project. So what Taya was saying is happening to me in this very moment where, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I can say, sorry, I need to reduce my role in this, because it's not really bringing me joy right now. It's pretty stressful because every meeting we're just going around in circles trying to figure out what it is that we're doing. And it seems like maybe there needs to be a total restructuring of this project idea before it moves forward with other collaborators. But yeah, I've been talking with other people trying to figure out, you know, should I continue doing this, because it's a topic that really interests me and I want to know more about it, but it's really taking away from a lot of my other projects that I'm very passionate about. And I, you know, started my semester with a semester plan, not a 5-year plan, just a semester plan. And even that I've had to edit quite a bit, because yeah, life happens, you know, like getting things like R&Rs, you don't know when those are going to happen. It could be very soon, or it could be months, maybe even a year sometimes before you get that back. And sometimes they're easy to address, sometimes they're really difficult to address. And yeah, it's been tough trying to figure out where things fit within my plan. But when I sat down and did it, I definitely realized I'm way too overcommitted on projects right now. I cannot say yes to any more projects at all this semester or even this year, because it just won't fit in my schedule. There's no way.
Well, to reiterate something Jess said earlier that I thought was really smart was saying maybe. I use this strategy a lot when people ask specifically about research projects, like collaborating on research projects, sometimes with other stuff too, whether it's a service commitment or they just want me to like weigh in on something. Like pick your brain requests are just like pretty frequent in general. And so what I'll do if I'm interested at all, rather than just saying yes, I put off the moment of saying yes or no for as long as possible, and say, oh, like, can we talk about it for 15 minutes? Or I'd love to hear more. You know, I want to make sure that I have the bandwidth to devote to this before saying yes definitively or whatever. And then I am pretty conservative about what I definitely say yes to. I think besides like research, we've talked a lot about like research projects or collaborations, saying yes or no to those. Things I say no to most often are like reviewing for journals, right? Like that's, I think all of us have to go through of like, okay, we have finite time and that's the thing that we get asked to do maybe the most often. Meeting with people, like meeting with students who want to ask us questions, whether about the course or about being a future student that's supervised by us or something like that, or people who want to meet with us to, I don't know, like use our expertise in some way, or yeah, admitting someone to actually advise them or supervise them, right? We're like reviewing applications for students who want to go to graduate school, and that's so hard, but we have to pick, right? And we have to say no to a lot of those applicants, or just to the emails, the initial emails that we get throughout, the months before applications are due. So I take a pretty conservative approach to those with like finite tasks. I say no when I literally don't have the calendar space, and my calendar is set up very strictly from the beginning to reflect where I need to be allocating my time, like for that week, for that semester, even for the academic year. I put my, like, to use a Stephen Covey term, my big rocks in place early, and they're not movable, right, for anything except like one of my students has a thing that they really need or someone who has less power than me that I can help them, like then I'll move something for them. But like those are the things that they're on my calendar, and someone asks me to do a review or someone asks me to meet with them, I'm like, sorry, I actually don't have room on my calendar, so no. By reprioritizing, I'm pretty clear early on. I don't really feel apologetic about it, especially when it's not something that, like, I literally tell them, like, I honestly, to be able to get tenure, to be able to continue this career, I really need to be prioritizing these 3 things. This isn't one of them. I hope we can pick this up again in the future because I'm interested, but right now is not the time. So let's revisit in however many years it will be. And just for context too, like on a personal note, I suspect one of the reasons I got asked to be on this panel was because I have a big family, and I started graduate school relatively late, and the family honestly is something that keeps my priorities really straight. My focus on my goals very clear-eyed. I'm not saying I'm like always awesome at this, but my time that I'm working is pretty darn efficient because it ends. I work 9 to 5. I don't work weekends 90% of the time, 95% of the time. So like when I know I have to fit all of my job responsibilities into those hours, I'm pretty highly motivated and efficient to prioritize early and say no early, and tell people up front what I can and can't give them. So, and that's been a learning process, right? Like I was not like good at that, and sometimes still not good at that. But I've learned a lot of strategies, and I feel like I have a pretty deep toolbox now to get me back on track when I feel like I'm drifting a little bit, or when I'm not as productive as I should be, or when I'm like unsure of what to say yes or no to. Like right now I have 5 or 6 emails in my inbox that are like people asking me for things that I'm just not sure how to answer them. Yes, no, I don't know. So maybe I should take my own advice and say, tell me more, maybe.
Thank you. All of that is really great advice for us. Hearing a lot of communicate early, communicate clearly, say no when you can before it even starts. If you find yourself in a position where you said yes, you need to back out, do it gracefully, but don't wait too long. And then, of course, noting that we're not just balancing stuff in academia, we're balancing life outside as well. And so setting clear boundaries and prioritizing your time in academia and prioritizing your time outside with family and others is very important. So drawing those boundaries where you need to and being strict with yourself and others. Thank you all. And then we have another question here for you. How have the roles, responsibilities, and projects you have taken on shifted over time? What changes or similarities did you experience between graduate school, early career, and beyond?
I'm happy to kick us off on this one. So my work right now is just a lot of management. So I currently have 5 active federal grants, another 4 where funding's run out, but the tasks have not, and another 7 under review this year. And so that is lots of meetings, lots of guiding others, thinking about the big picture and getting others started on it, and then coming in later to offer feedback, support, critique. But I'm not like doing a lot of data collection or analysis on my own, and I'm spending less time writing, but I'm writing more because I'm better at it, so it's faster. So in grad school, I think I was probably already a really involved graduate student. My advisor passed away in my 3rd year and was the PI of a multi-million-dollar IS project, and managing that project fell to me. So I did that for the last couple of years of grad school, but that was just one project. And I didn't have students, and I didn't have teaching, and I didn't have other people who depended on me for their jobs. And so that is the big shift there, where there's so much pressure on me to do this management, to make this money, to keep people employed, not just graduate students, but postdocs, research assistants, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been the big shift in the mindset, and it would be lovely to just have time to take classes and focus on my research. So I miss that. You should enjoy it while you have it.
Oh, mic's not for my face. Thank you. Yeah, we have that time right now to kind of just settle into classes and whatnot before it shifts into having that pressure on you that you have responsibilities to others. Yeah.
I'd say moving from mentee to mentor, and I mean that not just with working with graduate students, but working with faculty also. When I was a new assistant professor, I was very fortunate to have more senior faculty take me under their wing. And you don't just walk out of grad school and write an NIH or an IES grant. You have to learn how to do it. You have to be mentored. And I had some very generous colleagues who did that for me and taught me how to do that and taught me the tricks of the trade. And now I feel like it's like pay it forward. Like it's my responsibility now to do that for others and to show others how to do that. And so that's a part that really just I see as changing over time. And it's because certain things are, people have different experiences in graduate school, and some people come out knowing how to write a grant. Most people do not. Some people come out knowing how to write an article. Some people do not. Some people come out knowing how to review an article. Some people don't. So that's been a big change, and just really reflecting on the support that I had, and then thinking about, it's really, senior faculty. I think that's a responsibility of senior faculty to continue mentoring and to not just hire people and let them good luck to you, see you in 5 years. That's not how it should work.
Thank you. Yeah, the mentor to mentee, I think I often find myself stuck thinking about going from mentee to mentor graduate student wise, but going from mentee to mentor after that, moving into more senior faculty positions is something to remember as well.
Yeah, I will say, really the biggest change for me has been adding teaching into my schedule. And again, remembering that I'm a 1st-year faculty member, so I don't have grad students. And I will say I'm very nervous about the change in my schedule that's going to happen when I have graduate students and members of my lab doing things. Because right now that's not in my schedule. And I'll admit my schedule right now, I very much enjoy it. I feel like I've got it down. Some weeks are better than others, but I figured out how to add teaching in and how much time I should dedicate to that, because teaching will take as much time as you will let it take. But at least at my institution, that's such a small part of what you're expected to do. And so you really shouldn't be spending so much time with teaching, which is hard for many of us because we really, really love teaching. That's why we're typically in ed psych, because of this whole teaching aspect of it. So yeah, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what it's going to look like going from mentee to mentor. And I've been trying to set boundaries for myself in terms of what I want to model for my future grad students. So I definitely worked weekends in grad school and in my postdocs. And now I'm really trying not to do that because I don't want to encourage my graduate students to work weekends unless it's absolutely necessary. But the 7-day work week, it's not great. That's how burnout happens. That's how people get, just really tired of academia and research. And I just don't want to encourage my students to do that. So for me, I'm really trying to think of what are the things that I'm doing that my potential graduate students will see me doing, and do I want them to see me doing those things or not? So even though I don't have any right now, I do mentor other students, just not within my own lab. Trying to think of how my schedule will look like and my time commitments will look like once I do have like physical students that I'm mentoring and advising in my lab.
Thank you. Yeah, the teaching will take as much time as you allow it. Kind of hit home for me. There's been some weeks where I'm like, oh, I should also do other things besides just the teaching, even just as a graduate student. So finding those boundaries, I keep saying boundaries, and they're just so important. Can't emphasize them enough in this Motivation Monday tonight.
Yeah, so to just add to that, I think for me, there were many shifts. I feel like at every stage of like from being a brand new grad student to being a more advanced graduate student and then to being a brand new assistant professor, I feel like there were always things that were like in my zone of proximal development that felt really, really hard that I was learning how to do, and immediately needing to turn around and teach someone else how to do that same thing or a similar thing. And that's great, right? Like there's so many good things about that. I feel very grateful to my advisor for giving me that opportunity. Almost the minute I started graduate school, I was also overseeing the undergraduate RAs and teaching them how to do the tasks that I was learning how to do. And I'm in many ways I do that still, right? Like with my own graduate students, they want to study really cool things. They want to do projects on really cool things that I have no idea what that is, and so I just try to provide support and have a good conversation about it, and we do try to model the kinds of things I would do if I was gonna embark on that project. Fly the plane as we build it, right? But I think one of the biggest shifts for me from, let's say, graduate school to then being a faculty member is maybe the scope of the projects and the type of visioning that I need to do to be effective at all these other things, right? So make sure the projects are there and the funding is there. Because I think when I was first learning to do research, I was thinking in terms of like, how do I get a line on my CV? And so how do I write a paper? How do I get a publication? How do I like learn how to do this currency that is the currency of our trade? And so I just was super happy when I could string a couple papers together. And so then it was kind of a big transition to be like, well, how about write a whole grant that should be a collection of papers? How about write a 5-year grant that should be like part of a systematic program of research? And I think that actually started when I'm, getting ready to apply for jobs, right? So a year or two before I'm finished with graduate school, I'm watching some of my grad student siblings go on the job market, and they have this amazing narrative of like, here's what I've done, here's how it all fits together, and here's what I will contribute in my new position. And I couldn't imagine being able to do that, right? But I could see good models, I had good mentorship, and I got there. So I felt like that was a nice stepping stone then for being able to write grants and have bigger visions. But it's still something that I like ask for help on. Like I have, whenever I get a chance to sit down with a valued mentor who I feel like is really good at this like thinking of really cool project ideas and really cool, ambitious ideas, we talk about this and I ask, I'm like, here's what I'm thinking right now, but I think I'm thinking kind of small. Like, where'd you come up with this idea? How do you get inspiration to help you think really ambitiously and think big? That's really helpful. Because yeah, I didn't practice it too much in graduate school, and now I'm lucky to be at an institution where we have wings to fly and where the sky's the limit on what we can do and what we're encouraged to do. So that's kind of exciting, and it's a challenge for me to get to like, okay, like let's think really big and let's think about the next thing. And then try to like mentor someone else to do that too at the same time.
Thank you. Yeah, the flying the plane as we make it. You're quickly learning and applying what you're learning, and then the changing, the shifting of what kind of your view is, how you're looking at things. Your lens changes, and that's awesome to hear. Um, and then to that, a similar point there, um, our next question looks at how do you continue progress towards long-term goals while still achieving and working on short-term goals? We've hit on ZPD, we've hit on models, shifting to goals.
So maybe some very practical, like nuts and bolts kinds of things. I got to teach the same course multiple times. I've taught my open intro stats course 5 years in a row, and that was a bit of a heavy lift at the first, the first time I taught it. My colleague very kindly gave me all of her materials though, right? So I was just building on those, and each year I tried to make that. I do put effort into making it better each year, but my prep is pretty minimal because I have the course in a place that I like it to be, and we're just making tweaks now, right, from year to year. And I've had a couple of courses that I've taught every single year that I've been here, and that's been really helpful for minimizing, like, new course preps are just so much more time, right? So before tenure, I've been super lucky to have the same course over and over again. And then I feel like my whole like machine of scheduling and prioritizing and deciding is about making space for deep thinking, right? Like that's one of my favorite parts of this job. It's the thing that I want to do the most. And I think it's the place where we can have the most practical impact, theoretical impact is when we're thinking about the things that we care about, right? When we're designing some really cool study, or we're writing up our analyses, or we're running some cool analyses, or we're, theorizing. So I have to make space for that. And that means mental space, like not only time in my schedule, because I could put 2 hours on here for like theorize, like think about theory, but I won't do that if my mind is cluttered, right? Like if I don't know that all the like most important things coming up have a place for them. And that might be my thing. That might be kind of my, my own rhythm. But the other last thing I'll mention on this is A time and B time. And like I know my own students are here are gonna be like, yeah, we know, but A time and B time, everyone has like times of the day where they're most productive and they're thinking the most clearly. This is the best advice I feel like I got in graduate school. Kerry Rosseth, he had this great advice. Put your most important tasks in your A time every day. So my A time is like 9 a.m. to 11:30. That's writing time. Maybe not all of it is going to be writing time, but most days at 9 a.m. I am writing, and that's my A time. Everything else can go in B time for me, because for writing, that's when I need the most like mental capacity to do that. And everything else can go in B time. So that's like very nuts and bolts how to make sure that I make time for these long-term, maybe more ambitious, maybe more like dreamy goals, is the mental space, like clearing the mental space by making sure my tasks are taken care of.
Yeah, A time and B time. Love that. Figuring out when you're most productive. And then I also really appreciated you discussing like now that you're doing the same course over and over, you're just tweaking it at this point. And having those materials that were shared with you, going back to like the paying it forward mentality. Once we have those materials we can share with others, we were so grateful to have them. So being sure we're sharing them with others. I myself have also been very grateful to have folks share materials with me.
Yeah, and I think, trying to make sure that your short-term goals are going to lead to your long-term goals. So like I said, I created a semester plan for this semester. And within that, I had my longer term goals and then what I needed to do in order to get to that longer term goal. And one thing that a colleague said was like the siren song of email. And it is so true. if my email is up, I am like, oh, let me just respond to this. Otherwise, I'll forget about it. And I've been like really actively trying to leave the email off, respond to it at the end of the day, my B time. And sometimes that works out really well. And other times I forget to respond to messages, like sending my bio for this event. But at the end of the day, like I'll get a reminder if it's really important. Someone will remind me that I've forgotten about it. But like keeping track of things that I'm calling false productivity. So responding to emails feels very productive. Like, look at me, I'm working, I'm responding to emails. But is that actually going to help me with my shorter term and my longer term goals? And that's something that I've started to become a lot more aware of, is like, are these things that feel very productive to me, are they actually productive for my own goals? Yeah, and that's a change that I've just recently made, because I need to be productive. I need to be writing. I need to be doing research. And so understanding like, okay, well, I did work from 9 to 5 today, but I didn't get any writing done. What did I spend my time on? So now I've started to do a better job of tracking my time, and I have a short-term goal to lead to a long-term goal of spend 30 minutes writing every day. And for me, that was really hard to get into, because it used to just be, well, to write, I need to have a big chunk of time to get my mind right. And sometimes that's true, but also those 30 minutes add up. And, sometimes the hardest part is opening up that document and looking at, okay, well, what was I saying before? And if you're consistently doing that, it's a lot easier to get words down than to have that 2-hour block every day dedicated to writing.
Yeah, the false productivity and being honest with yourself is so hard, I think, to do, and tracking your time and like, what did I actually do in these hours that I worked today? And then, yeah, the work, setting aside time every day to write. I believe another Dr. Anderman might have given me that advice at one point, to set aside time every day to write and just do it, because it does add up. So not giving yourself that excuse of like, oh my gosh, when am I going to have this huge chunk of time to write, and when am I going to be in a good mental state for it? Just getting it done. Yeah.
I definitely agree with things that Christy and Jessica have said. I think what I could add is that, for me, I've got to surround myself with good people and kind of empower them to get things done and be there as a resource, but not hover. And like try to learn to do that with multiple projects is tough. And then as far as my goals, I have like sticky notes with the things I need to do. And they're right in front of me on the base of my computer, so that like I can see them reminding me. But then like every couple of months, I look at the sticky notes and I kind of revisit, like some of these I haven't made any progress on. And well, why haven't I made any progress on it? Because maybe it's not something that's really important to me. So take that off the sticky note and be okay with moving on. And some other kind of nuts and bolts things. There is one big group project we have right now. I have a lot of students working on it. And we've been just doing very brief check-ins, like making sure that like 15 minutes a week we come together to talk about our progress. And like it's not overwhelming to have all this time, but we've blocked out a larger portion of time, but we try to get done with the meeting as soon as possible so that people can use that time that they've blocked off to work on the project itself. And that has like kept us moving forward. And in general, like working with other people, accountability helps me turn those short-term benchmarks into long-term project goals too.
Something I've discovered just recently that I use religiously now, it's called Microsoft To Do, TODO. I don't know if any of you have used it. It's been a game changer for me. It appears on all my devices. It follows me everywhere I go. And I just put a list of things I have to get done by the end of the day that are my absolute priorities. And it's like a guilty conscience, like it's on my phone, it's on my iPad, it's on my laptop, it's on my desktop. but it reminds me and it makes me go back and focus when all the bazillion emails come in and the phone calls and everything happens. That's like my, like, when I'm in like my office, like I will not leave that office barring an emergency until I get the things on that list done. And that's been really good in terms of getting those short-term goals out of the way. And I just add to the list every day, and it lets you, if you have things from that you haven't done, it gives you a chance to put them back the next day. And I highly recommend it, or something like that. I like that one because it syncs on all the devices, and it's, it really is like my guilty conscience. It follows me everywhere.
Big fan of Microsoft To Do myself. You can also do like different chunks. So you can do it by your different projects. You can do different to-do lists. And if you flag an email in Outlook, it'll add it to a list for your to-do lists. For those who haven't tried this tool, very helpful. And then something that you both hit on was going into our good self-regulation, where we can set as many goals as we want, but we have to go and evaluate, did we do them? And why did we meet or not meet them? And then moving forward, and what do we need to change? So good reminders there for practicing what we preach. Oh my gosh, yes, Max, the ding is extremely lovely to hear.
It's a positive reinforcer.
It is. All right, we've got a few more minutes here. So our next question is, that's what I just asked. Our next question is actually, how do you determine what gains priority in any given day, week, or month? So looking at how you're prioritizing different tasks, different responsibilities.
I'll go because I've been wanting to say this since Jessica was talking about not working weekends, and I'll just offer a counterpoint, which I always do in these discussions. I work 7 days a week usually, but I work like 5 hours a day. I like it that way. It started when my kids were young and I needed time during the week to take them to doctor's appointments or clubs or whatever, and I had to make up the work somehow. And so I had to work on the weekends, and now I just prefer, like, my family's playing video games, I might as well be, but I only do the fun work on the weekends, like if I want to run stats or something like that, unless I have pressing deadlines. So I'll mention that. And then as far as prioritizing, sadly, it's like usually whatever is the most immediate fire gets precedence. But then I try to give myself a day or two each week, and this is often the weekends, when I work on things that aren't those things, and instead things that I enjoy and that fill me up in some way. But for those days, I have to be comfortable telling that like nagging voice in my head that whatever other deadline is looming, that like you have to like settle down and I have to ignore it while I focus on this other thing. So I have to compartmentalize in that way in order to get the non like fire stuff done. And then there are things that just take like a lot of time, this kind of busy work, like Jessica was mentioning. It feels productive, but it's not. And so I try to batch those things. Like, and I think Christy mentioned responding to prospective student emails, especially as grad director, gets a ton of those. So I try to limit that to just 2 days. It's much more efficient if I copy and paste the FAQs into a million emails at once instead of just random emails here and there.
Thank you. Yeah. As a counterpoint to the positive ding on the to-do list, the not so lovely ding of the email on the weekends. I have some fellow students and potentially an advisor who knows that sometimes on the weekend I just mute my email, like I might be working, but sometimes you just gotta mute it because it's not a good ding.
Totally echo Taya's advice to like put out the fires, of course. Like things that are both urgent and important will usually jump to the top of the list for sure. Another thing that I like to do is like if I literally can pick like which paper to work on a given day or something like that, if it's not like immediately jumping out which thing to prioritize. One thing I like to do is the snowball method, like pick the project that's closest to being finished and then like finish it, because then you have this awesome momentum feeling and it kind of propels you into the next thing. So even if I don't finish it on that day, at least I'm like, ooh, I can like see the finish line, and that creates a nice like motivational feeling that can propel me through my other work. So snowball method is helpful. And then kind of interspersing, sometimes I also intersperse like a longer term project that needs a lot with like something that's closer to the finish line, just so I'm feeling comfortable that we're making progress toward all of those things, and that I'm not going to get super stressed by the like really big product not like having to kind of rush to the finish line. I hate rushing to the finish line. Again, maybe my personal preference. That's not super positively motivating for me to have for writing projects, especially to have that. So that's how I do it. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
I like the snowball method, giving you that momentum and that sense of success. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Taya's counterpoint to my point about not working weekends. But I do think that that is important. Is like, at least for faculty and for grad students in general, you have quite a bit of flexibility over your schedule, aside from like teaching where you need to be like in the classroom from a certain time. But that's one of the really nice things about this job, is that like, if working 5 hours a day works better for your schedule, you can do that. And like, it's wonderful. And sometimes I do that. Like some weeks it's like, I'm just so tired. I need to like end my day early because I'm just not going to get anything productive. And then I will do that work on the weekend if I feel like it's really needed, if there's a deadline. And the other times, if like nothing is going on in our house, I'll do some work that I know would tempt me away from writing. So for example, I'm doing a systematic review right now, and I'm on the abstract screening phase. And it's like so easy to just be like, well, instead of writing, I'll just screen abstracts. But if I, have a couple of hours over the weekend to do that, then I'm less inclined to do that during my writing time. So I think, yeah, just being aware of like what tasks you need to get done and what's on your level of importance. I've started to put specific tasks on my calendar. I'm playing around with it. I don't know if I love it. I think I'm going to try out this to-do list thing, but it has been helpful to see, okay, you said from 11 to 12, you were going to work on the intro section of this paper. That's what you're going to do. And then you can't schedule meetings during that time. Like, I want to be that person who has a hard time scheduling a meeting because I have things booked on my calendar that for me should be non-negotiable. They're my writing time. Instead of being the person who has all day Monday available, pick a time. So that's something that I've been like trying around with, is putting it on my actual calendar and seeing how that works for me and whether I actually do those things or not.
Thank you. Thanks. Does anyone else want to share on that one? I can't remember if everyone got to share.
I didn't, but I have nothing really additional to add. Those were all good pieces of advice.
Excellent. Certified stamp of approval. This is a reminder to all of the audience members. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We have one more question for our panelists, and then we'll go to any questions that the audience has. So our last question for you all is, how can you make existing commitments more engaging and challenging so you don't feel the need to overcommit to different tasks? Or is there a different solution to that?
Just say yes to the things you're passionate about and say no to the things you aren't. Because if you're passionate about it, then they're going to be engaging, and research in general is challenging enough. So I'm not worried about that aspect of things. There's always some sort of kink that happens when you're doing a study that wasn't expected. So yeah, I don't know about the existing commitments, but moving forward, say yes to the things that you're passionate about.
Yes, the
I agree. It's really you kind of know if you don't know, then you probably should err on the side of saying no, given how many commitments, particularly if it's a new research project or something of that nature. And I think that, I don't know, this really two different questions for me. It's making it engaging and making it challenging. Most of the things we get asked to do are pretty challenging. I'm usually looking to make things less challenging and not more challenging. But you should be so lucky as to have things to make less challenging. It's more about making it engaging. Again, it's this whole, I mean, we've all chosen strange careers that most people in the real world don't know what the heck we do, face it. And so we've already are working on things that most people don't understand, but we understand it. And so I think you can, when new opportunities come along, you can look at it and say, is this something within this very esoteric area in which I work in academia that is going to be engaging for me? Is it something I'm going to care about? And sometimes you take things on because it may not be the most engaging, but it may be, sometimes it's just, that's a really nice short-term project. I can make a contribution to that. I can get something out of it and feel good about it. And it doesn't have to be the work of my life. It's an opportunity.
I get this question. I think that lots of us are attracted by the shiny new thing. And I certainly am, right? It's really difficult to overcome that attraction to shiny new thing. And so I try to work it out so that whatever shiny new thing is an extension of something I'm already doing. And so work on new thing can enrich the existing project or even help it get finished. And I think this happens more and more, like as you get further into your career and you develop like your expertise, it's easier to do some things because like, I could write a lit review on this thing fairly easily, or, I know this particular method really well. And so your projects start to overlap in those areas. And so then by saying yes to something new, you can almost reinvigorate the thing that you've lost engagement with.
Really great points. I will say I don't think I've ever committed to new different tasks because my
uh-oh, we might have lost Christy. The Wi-Fi.
my back, my
You're
internet
back.
went out for a bit. Okay, good. I was just saying I don't think I've ever made new commitments or looked for overcommitments because my existing tasks were not engaging or challenging enough. I think I'm way too anxious about letting people down to like do that exact connection. But I do think as like someone who studies this thing, like how motivation changes over time within and between individuals, I think no matter how passionate you are about a project when you first sign up, I feel like there's gonna be a time when that passion, that interest, that engagement wanes at least a little bit. So I feel like I have to cultivate strategies for carving it down, making it more manageable in the moment. Like usually I'm not interested in starting back on the task because I don't know where to start, or I don't really feel like I know what the next thing is to do, or I don't feel quite competent, right? Like I really think interest and engagement follows competence, like self-efficacy. So I have to boost my self-efficacy somehow, usually by like chunking down that task or making the list of like, okay, what are the finite tasks that I need to do, and where's the one that I should start on. Writing daily is a great way to keep it feeling manageable because you have it at the forefront of your mind. Usually you don't have it, like, what did I do 2 weeks ago on this? No, I can just like look at what I did a couple days ago, or last week at the most. So that I think that is very helpful in keeping the tasks engaging. But yeah, working with other people too. Like I think a few of us have mentioned that, for multiple reasons, that working with other people helps you be accountable, helps it be interesting, helps you get a perspective. You can say to them like, "Oh, I'm having a hard time getting going on this part of it," and they can either help you with that, or just encourage you. So great collaborators are like gold. And I think like everything we've talked about, things get better with practice. Like you get better at things with practice. Whether that's like figuring out what scheduling works for you or what, arrangement of priorities works for you. That all, like, I think if I was in this session as a grad student myself, listening to a panel like this, I think I would have been really overwhelmed. Like, how could I ever fit in research and teaching and service and like learn how to budget and learn how to mentor students and like all those things? And I felt that like in my first couple of years, I was like, I don't know how to, I wasn't trained to do these things. Um, but trying them and just showing up and continuing to show up, you get more efficient at writing and you get more efficient at figuring out good research questions. You get more strategic about figuring out what's going to be a good project to invest in versus what's not going to be super fruitful because you've practiced. Like that growth mindset thing turns out like it actually can be, helpful to have that for yourself because you will build those abilities with practice.
Thank you. Yeah, really taking it all in. And it has been a little overwhelming to hear all of these amazing things you all do and thinking, like, how will we do this? So it's nice to be reminded you will learn if you keep persisting, you keep giving yourself the chance, chunking it out, promoting your own self-efficacy. Thank you all so much. And now, in our last 10 minutes, we would like to open it up to the audience and what questions you all have had as you're listening. As folks are writing, I will share our upcoming events. We have our next Motivation Monday will be on navigating the dissertation and qualifying exam journey. And that'll be Monday, November 27th. We also have our affinity groups, which have been renamed to Grads Discuss. Those will be happening on Monday, November 13th. And we have our ongoing writing groups on Thursdays and Tuesdays, which is a time that maybe we could start that set aside a chunk of time to write and start with just a once a week if we're not at the everyday part yet. Writing group is a great place for accountability, setting aside time to write. Not to promote our own programs here, but shamelessly. Alrighty. We have one question in the chat here. I will stop sharing screen. Our question is, speaking of the dissertation or qualifying exam process, how did you manage other projects and opportunities during this time specifically?
I'm laughing at this because it's when I did my dissertation, I had started a postdoc. So I was in like a totally different position before even graduating, and that was just like the timing of things. And it was pretty stressful. Like the dissertation takes a lot of time and mental energy. And I was like in a whole other university working on other projects. But again, like that's something that like if we're talking about your grad career, that's your long-term goal is getting that dissertation done and graduating. And so having short-term goals every week of what you're going to get done specifically for that dissertation. And really that should be your priority, right? Like you can't graduate without doing your dissertation. And there are hopefully papers that will come from your dissertation as well. So there should be a lot of motivation to get that thing done. I definitely just had to set aside writing chunks for that. And oftentimes that was the weekend for me because I was working with someone else and I had other responsibilities that I had committed to, and I needed to get those done. But definitely, making sure that that's a priority, even with other projects like in academia, there aren't often strict deadlines for things. But this is one where you really need to have a strict deadline for yourself because you need to graduate. You can't move forward in your academic journey or whatever you choose to do after you graduate without getting that done. Other things can hopefully potentially wait, or you just structure your week a little differently where, you know, your A time really is your dissertation time.
I don't remember how I did it because it was a long time ago. But one thing my own advisees that and some are on this call who I for dissertation, I do the backward planning with them. And like once it's getting near the end, I say like literally, what's your dissertation? Let's, month that your defense month. And then do backward planning, say, okay, what has to happen between now and then? And we make a calendar and say, let this guide all your other decision making. If you want to make this goal, these are the things that have to happen, including building in time for back and forth of versions between me and you, which could take quite a while. But I think that's something that's really, really helpful, is if you have an end point in mind, to do backward planning and backward scheduling and say, what are all the things that has to happen, and map those out. And any decisions you make have to be worked in around that.
Really great advice, all. And another thing that really was helpful to me during comprehensive exams for me, and then for partially during my dissertation too, my advisor was really supportive of me clearing the decks of other commitments. Like the comprehensive exams at my institution at Michigan State was 1 week where we had to just write for that week, and people did try to balance it with other things sometimes, but I just cleared it. I didn't do anything except for the comprehensive exams. And Lisa let me use her office even, right? Like she's like, you just, be in this space and write the comprehensive exams. Similarly for the dissertation, especially for like the data collection piece, I was really only doing that and like bare essentials on other things to keep them in the air. But I like planned ahead of time to know that maybe 50 to 75% of my time is going to be focused on this, and I shouldn't take on other things. I should make sure other things are tied up in advance so that I can devote that much time to it, because it's new, right? It's all new. You don't know what it's going to be like. So it makes a difference to have enough time dedicated to it.
Some of that's luck, right? Like whether you can set aside your other priorities, or it sounds like Jessica wasn't able to. I was very lucky. The project I was managing had ended, and I was able to have like a good 5 weeks where probably 75 or 80% of my time was just focused on finishing my dissertation. And hopefully you can somehow instrument that to happen, because you will need that dedicated time.
Thank you all. Those are all really important things to keep in mind, and trying to find time to chunk it out, backwards planning, of course, things that I will be doing, I'm sure, things that folks can take into account now. We also in the chat had a lovely reminder that our graduate students discuss that is coming up that I shared. We'll be talking about CVs, which are highly relevant as we enter dissertation and going on the job market. So CVs, what to include, when to include things, talking about the job market. And then we also have an extra writing group on Fridays dedicated just to the job market and fellowship applications for those who are in that stage. I would love to thank all of our panelists as we wrap things up. We heard a lot of great things in our Motivation Monday tonight. Lots on setting your boundaries, lots on blocking out your time, communicating early, communicating clearly, communicating often, and just setting up expectations for yourself and others while you're trying to balance all of these different responsibilities that are expected of you, and knowing that they'll shift, and really building up that efficacy for yourself in doing new tasks and learning as you go. So as we close, thank you to our panelists for your insightful and enriching conversation tonight. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great rest of your night, everyone.